welcome to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. It's Wednesday, the 8th of May, 2024. I'm Craig Resnik-Hanson, and today I'm joined by Oliver Fisher. Oliver is a British journalist and football writer, but also an AC Milan obsessive. He co-founded SempreMilan, where he continues to serve as editor, and we hope you enjoy our chat today as we get into all things rossoneri. Hi, Ollie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thanks so much for coming on. I can't wait to get into all things Milan with you. But before we do, where are you from? You're a Yorkshireman, right?
I am indeed, yeah. Born and raised in Leeds. Not a Leeds fan, but yeah, come from the north of England. Currently live in London, so my accent sounds a bit funny to a lot of people, but trying to stay true to my northern roots.
Well, it's an accent I'm very used to because actually I think we went to the same uni because you also went to Leeds Trinity, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I graduated from there myself with a degree in journalism in 2008.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I was 2017, so 9 years
Oh,
on.
wow.
But yeah, it was a good uni. Met a lot of good friends there that I still speak to today. And yeah, played quite an important part of like in what I'm doing today. So I've got fond memories of Trinity.
Well, before we get into the Milan stuff, I noticed that, you said you were born in Leeds and I think you're a Huddersfield fan, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for my
So
sins,
how
I'm
did
a
that
I'm a
come
town
about?
fan.
How did you sort of get into football and why Huddersfield?
So, my dad is originally from Huddersfield. Grew up in a village and sort of a few miles outside of Huddersfield, and was a town fan and still is a town fan. Moved over to Leeds to be with my mum, and yeah, he just passed it on to me, really. He has said in the past that he was prepared for me to grow up a Leeds fan. Not saying he would have endorsed it, but he was sort of mentally prepared for that possibility because obviously in the early 2000s they were on a good run in the Champions League and stuff like that. But realistically, I went to my first game in 2001 when I wasn't even really old enough to know what was going on, and I've had a town shirt on me since birth. And yeah, that's just it really. I think for a lot of people they follow the team that their dad did or whatever, and that was the case for me.
And how and when did you start following Milan?
So this is like a two-part story, really. I mean, it starts in the mid 2000s. A lot of my friends at school at the time were glory hunters, and they supported Liverpool or Man United, and obviously Milan had the two finals against Liverpool in '05 and '07, and just to try and wind them up, I obviously rooted for Milan to try and piss off the Liverpool. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear. To try and annoy
You
the
can, don't worry.
to try and annoy the Liverpool fans that I was mates with. Obviously didn't go well in '05, but went better in '07. Then in the late 2000s, they signed a lot of players that I really liked. Obviously Beckham went there, Ronaldinho went there. There was the emergence of players like Pato, Kaká had been there. Just a very, very fun team to watch. And Huddersfield's away colours have always traditionally been red and black stripes. So I was kind of drawn to it through that as well. But it was no more than sort of having a soft spot for a team, really. And then for a few years, I just followed Huddersfield home and away, like, rarely missed games and stuff like that. And then in about 2015, 2016 time, I got acquainted. I started picking up the Milan stuff again. I started sort of following the results and planning a potential trip to San Siro where I'd always wanted to go. And I actually met online through somebody who picked up a Yorkshire expression in a tweet that I'd put out about Milan. They got in touch and were like, "Oh, you sound like you're from Yorkshire." And from there, I struck up a friendship with somebody who also supported Huddersfield and AC Milan, and that was really what kick-started it all because I had somebody to go to games with, and then I went a few times in the following couple of years to San Siro, went to Milan derbies and stuff like that, and I just got hooked from there, really.
That is so crazy because I was gonna ask you, do you have any sort of fellow AC Milan fans? And to meet another guy who followed both Huddersfield and Milan, you two must be the only people on the planet who've got that combo going on.
Oh, do you know what? You'd be surprised. There's four of us that I know about. There's two others as well. So the guy that I met first is called Gian Mario, and his dad is Sardinian. And he, when you're from the islands in Italy, I suppose you can support either Cagliari in their case, and he does have a soft spot for Cagliari, but really most of them support one of the big clubs in northern Italy. So he was raised a Milanista from birth, and then through social media, through having SempreMilan and stuff like that. I've since come to meet two others, a guy called Sheldon, who was the first guy that I met through sort of through Twitter, through social media, and then another guy more recently.
That is so crazy because yeah, I was gonna sort of see if you had a similar experience to me because I've been a Man City fan for about 25 years. I'm quite jaded now, to be honest. I don't really I get less and less interested in the club every year because it's so far apart from what it was
Mm.
when I fell in love with it when I was 9. But now I just I more follow my local team, Warsaw now. Sort of like how you had the Huddersfield thing and then got interested in Milan. I had the Warsaw thing, and then when I was about 9, I got interested in Man City, and then now I'm sort of just going back to Warsaw. But the point is, basically for most of my life, well, even to now, really, because I don't know any of the it's just kids who are getting into it who are glory hunting on it now. But when I was younger, no one really cared about Man City, obviously. But I had one friend as well, which is really
Mm.
unexpected. I knew one other person who was because I'm from the West Midlands, who was also a City fan. But basically, I've got a lot of experience of watching, big games that mean so much to me, but like no one else cares.
Yeah.
Or as it went a bit later on, they just actively cheering against us. Like when we got to the stage that we were like had the money and we were trying to break into the top 4 and like competing with Spurs. I'd be in the pub, but it would just be, everyone supporting Spurs,
Yeah,
including
yeah,
all
yeah.
my uni friends, and just I'd be totally alone.
Yeah.
But I wondered, have you had lots of experiences like that where you're watching a Milan game and you sort of do you ever I bet you wish you're in a bar in Milan with a bunch of fellow fans, right? Instead of just watching it alone. Or do you manage to get together with those few guys that you know and watch together on TV and stuff?
Yeah, do you know what? I tend to, if ever we go to the pub to watch games, I tend to either go to the fan club that there is in London. There's actually a Milan fan club in London. They meet near Fenchurch Street Station. So that can be a really, really good atmosphere. And obviously you're surrounded by fellow fans, people who are like-minded. So in that sense, it can be a really, really good vibe and a good way to watch a game. I haven't really watched too many games in the pub back up home in Yorkshire, but if I do, it tends to be games that don't necessarily matter so much, so there won't be tens of other fans in the room cheering against you or anything like that. But yeah, the club down here is really good, and then I know a bloke around the corner from me who again I met on social media when I moved down to London, and we sometimes just go to the local and get them to put it on. So there's plenty of options for going out and watching games, but I haven't really had that hostile anti-Milan sentiment really. The closest thing I can think of is when there was obviously the Champions League final last season between Man City and Inter, and we went to a pub down the road in Islington, and it felt like we were the only ones that were supporting Man City because it was full of Arsenal fans and a few others who just didn't want to see them win it. Whereas I'm obviously like, well, these sods beat us in the semis and I hate them. So I fully want Man City to win this game. And we erupted when that Rodri goal went in. But yeah, that's probably the closest I've come to any kind of weird overlap.
Well, that's one of the good things about living in London. You can get together a fan group of for any different type of club. But
Mm,
you mentioned going to the San Siro a few times. I mean, that's on the bucket list for me. I love watching football in different countries. I must have, I've been in, I don't know, 20 different countries watching games,
mm.
and there's a few up there, that I still would love to see one day. Game at the San Siro, Stadio Olimpico, go and watch Galatasaray in person, something like that.
Mm.
But how is that atmosphere in real life? What's it actually like being in the San Siro?
So the first experience that I had of San Siro was in 2015, I believe it was, and it was a Milan derby. The first one that I went to, we lost 1-0. and I had a ticket in the Inter end. And when I say the Inter end, really, it was their home derby. But it's more of a mix than that. It's not just the one end and then the rest of the stadium's all Inter. It was a bit more like 60-40 in their favour, say. So I went in the home section, not being able to get one with the Milan Ultras at that stage. And yeah, they won 1-0 with a goal in like the last 20 minutes or so, and the noise was absolutely deafening. Like, came out of the stadium with my ears ringing. Obviously, I was annoyed at the result, but I remember just thinking to myself, sort of as you were saying, I've ticked off something so amazing on my bucket list here, and I just can't wait to come back and do a derby where Milan are at home. Like when you walk out of the metro station, and because San Siro's quite flat and it's sort of in the middle of nowhere, it's 8 miles out of the city centre, and you see this big spaceship looking thing just dropped in the middle of this big car park, and you can hear the noise and you can smell the smoke from the flares, and you can hear the beer bottles being clinked and everything. Like, it is such an incredible experience. It's quite far removed from what you get in England, to be honest, but I think that's what makes it so attractive to people who might not necessarily support either club. They want to go because it's an iconic stadium for a reason. Yeah, it's dated, it's showing its age a little bit now, and both clubs are looking to move away from it and sort of into a new era. But it's football romance personified in concrete. I love the place to bits, and I've got so many happy memories there.
Yeah, we spoke on our last episode to Nima from
Hmm.
Sempre Inter.
Yeah.
Do you guys know each other? Is there like are you guys friendly with each other, or is there a rivalry between the two sides or anything?
No, we do know each other. We've known each other for about a decade, to be honest. A lot of people don't know this, but I first started writing for Sempre Inter because I took obviously an interest in Serie A, and I was always a Milan fan, but I wanted to sort of get some work experience done in the build up to uni and hopefully continuing into uni. So I knew a bit about them, obviously, with them being our rivals, got in touch with him, and I did a few shifts for them. And then, yeah, speaking to Nima, he said to me, "Oh, if you ever wanted to set up a Milan equivalent, then go for it." And thus, Sempre Milan was born from that.
Well,
Um,
it came to mind because he was talking last week about the that he had an experience where he went with some friends from uni because he went to uni in Wales, didn't he? And
he did, yeah.
his sort of English or Welsh friends went to Milan and met him, and they went to the San Siro together. I think also for a Milan derby, and he was saying, that I want to take them to the San Siro while it's still there, right? Because
Mm.
it's like you say, it's sort of there's a lot of murmurings about it being on the way out. I mean, is there a time frame or anything in mind? Have we got sort of is there an end date for when we might see the last game at the San Siro?
I think, see, so funnily enough, the news came out yesterday that there's a legislation in Italy that means that buildings that are over a certain age can't be touched. It's like a World Heritage type thing. And
Yeah.
they put a constraint on the second tier of it specifically, because obviously the first tier is like 100 years old now, but the second tier had been done up for a bit after that, and then it was like given another revamp in time for Italia 90. And it had been appealed, had this restriction. And in theory, if the restriction had been lifted, then the clubs would have been able to build the stadium next to San Siro as they were planning to do, and then part demolish the current San Siro. However, the restriction was upheld, which means now the only way that the clubs could move forward playing at San Siro is if they accepted the council's plan to renovate it again, which in theory they could do despite the restriction. They say that they can do it, and bring it up to speed. But both clubs see this as a bit of a ball ache, and they're pushing to go in other directions. Milan are trying to build one in San Donato, which is about it's a similar distance out, 7 or 8 miles, and it's in the southeast of the city. They've bought the land for it. They've put 40 million down to buy a huge plot of land, and they want to turn it into like a Milan village type thing over there.
So
And
they're both keen to get their own stadiums going and
yeah,
separate.
Yeah, because of the revenues. So at the moment, they rent the stadium from the council, and they have to hand over quite a substantial chunk of the revenues to the council in exchange for playing there. And obviously, as the clubs have returned to relevance with multiple Champions League appearances and league titles and stuff like that, they realise how important it is that they keep maximising those revenues. And both teams see it as the right at the right moment to sort of take a step into sort of following Juventus's lead a bit as well, because obviously they built the Allianz Stadium a few years ago and they've seen a big hike in their revenues as a result, even though it's only a 40,000 seater. So Milan are looking to move to San Donato in 2028, 29, around that time.
And
There's a
how
pro.
do you feel about that as a fan? Because I know that obviously it makes logical sense on a number of ways, not just sort of cynical, capitalism or whatever, that some people might call it, that they're trying to raise revenues, which even that is nothing wrong with trying to do that. It's a business and you want the club to be in good health, right, financially,
Mm.
but also the fact that they could finally have their own space, not have to keep sharing with Inter, all this stuff. But then as a fan, there's that romance of the San Siro. I mean, where do you stand on it? Would you rather they renovate it and keep trying to hold on, or are you ready for the new era?
I'm in two minds. Like, I think what is football without nostalgia, and what is you think what would Milan be without the San Siro as a city, and looking at the two clubs, but then also I'm a fan first and foremost. I am a supporter of AC Milan, not of San Siro. Therefore, I want the best for my club, and what the club say, and I trust them when they say this, is to move to our own brand spanking shiny new stadium. We've got an American ownership who I think are determined to build one of the best stadiums in the world, sort of akin to the Tottenham Stadium down the road from where I live now. So I'm more leaning towards that side of it, whereby I think it's time for us to cut the cord and move on because of the immense possibilities that come from constructing our own state-of-the-art home. But also the yeah, I don't know. It plays on the heartstrings a little bit, and I think it will be so surreal to go to the city and not go to San Siro for games anymore. The problem with everything, and I won't go into it any further because it would require a separate episode, is that Italian bureaucracy ruins everything. It just the solutions aren't there, and and they don't want to present the solutions for it to work moving forward. Really, this renovation plan that the council have put forward is just a last ditch attempt for them to try and get the clubs to do a U-turn. But I think they're sort of saying you've missed your chance now.
Well, going back to your trips to the San Siro that you've already had, hopefully you'll have a couple more while there's still time. But not only just from a Milan point of view, but what are the big differences that you've noticed in fan culture between England and Italy? Because I guess you've seen, several different away teams as well coming there. So, having got a taste of it, what would you say are the big differences?
I think there is quite an inherently big difference in the supporter culture between games, not just in Italy but in continental Europe and what we have here in England. Obviously, being a Huddersfield fan, my experiences growing up, and especially when I reached drinking age, was like you go to the pub 2 or 3 hours before kickoff, you walk down to the ground just in time for kickoff. You see the game, you go back to the pub, or you go for a Chinese or whatever, and you go home. And that's the match day routine for, I think, the majority of fans in England, or certainly a sizable chunk of them. Whereas in Italy, it feels a lot more organized. So obviously you've got the supporters groups like the Curva Sud for Milan and the Curva Nord for Inter. And if it's a derby, for example, they'll be in the stadium hours before setting up the choreographies and the tifos on every seat so that all fans can be part of the experience and build these amazing displays and stuff like that. But even for normal games, there's marches to the stadium, corteos they call them, that take place from places for away games and for some home games as well. They're in the stadium like 90 minutes before kickoff, and that is just so alien or it was so alien to me as someone who's grown up watching football in England. You can have a pint in the stands, even though you're not meant to. You can also, well, people do smoke in the stands, so that took a bit of getting used to for my girlfriend, for example, who I've taken along to a few games now. I just think there's so much more emphasis on supporting the team in the maximum way possible, and being in there early and building an atmosphere. And and supporting that way, which I quite like. I think there are definitely aspects of that that I would like to see translate over, but also you'd be surprised how many Italians envy what we have too. That don't hide the fact that they love going for a drink and sort of letting off steam, and it's very much still in the hands of the working class in that sense over in Italy. So there are different ways of doing it, and I quite like a bit of both, to be honest. But I really do respect the time and the effort and the passion that the ultras in particular put into supporting the club. It really is their life.
Yeah, I think I've noticed something similar as well, and there is a time and a place for both. Like you said, both can be enjoyed. But I think that, as you said, on the continent, it's a little bit more. They are actually supporting the team. Like the idea is to go there and to have a tangible impact on proceedings. Not, I find often in the English game that you sort of go and it's sort of like an expectance. You're kind of like, okay, now show me something. Like make me care, like make me cheer, or do something that I like. Whereas I think from what I've experienced in Germany and Spain, especially, it's not always like that. It's more, like we're here to support you, regardless of how. I'm sure that of course, they still can get angry and disappointed with things, and there can
Mm.
be protests and stuff. But I feel like it's a lot more positive as opposed to like just going in neutral and then waiting to be made happy. That's kind of what I've
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah.
But it could just be the clubs that I happen to support as well, because yeah, both of the fan bases that I'm sort of entwined in having their moments in recent years. But anyway,
Mm.
I wanted to ask you, what's been your favorite memory following Milan in person and on TV so far since you've got, right back into it?
I think my favourite memory being in the stadium was being there when we beat Inter 3-0 in the derby in 2016. Feels like a long time ago now, but that was the first time that I'd seen us beat them, and it was such a comprehensive win, obviously, and it was just a party. Like I went with Gian Mario, who I mentioned earlier, and we met up with a few guys from Scotland who were out there for the game, and we just had such a laugh, and the result was like the icing on top, if you like. Incredible celebrations into the night, and that was at a time when both teams were very mediocre as well. So the derby carried that bit more meaning because it was like the only thing you had to look forward to in the season. So being there for that was an incredible night, and I was glad to see that in person. I would say being away at Newcastle this season, for example, in the Champions League, was also a very good memory. Met up with so many people that I've spoken to online and stuff like that. And even though it didn't get us through the group stage, beating them late on was definitely fun. And I'd never thought I'd see Milan play Newcastle in the Champions League, so that was incredible to tick off. But in general, I would have to say that it was winning the league title in 2021-22, and there was a huge gathering at the Milan Club London for the game. Again, met up with so many friends that I've got acquainted with over the years. We just had to draw against Sassuolo to beat into to the title. We ended up winning 3-0. We were 3-0 up at half time. So essentially all the nerves went out of the window fairly early on. And again, it just became a big celebration and a big party. Plenty of pints up that day. And it was also sort of like the culmination of everything that we've built in terms of the project of the site as well. Because when we set up the website, as mentioned, we were really mediocre, and we got to this point where we'd built something really good, and all of a sudden the performances on the pitch were matching, and yeah, we got to celebrate that
I've
success.
spoken to a few people that have got a similar situation to you. I spoke to a guy recently called Nick Bell, who's a Malaga fan based in the UK, and he goes over to Malaga a few times a year and watches their games. And they've got a sort of community over there of sort of expats who are following Malaga home and away. And I was asking him about it, the sort of what interactions do you have with the locals when you're in the stadium? So I don't know if you've got, good Italian or anything, but I imagine either way, if you're there with your English friends, you're speaking English, you're having a great time. But do people around you sort of notice and go, oh, that's cool. Like these guys aren't from Milan and they're here, having a great time supporting the team. Do you get people say things to you about that?
Um, it has happened before. That game that I was talking about in particular, the 3-0 derby win against Inter when we went, I was wearing a retro shirt. It was like a really old one from the early 90s. And somebody asked about it in Italian. And then, when I responded, I think they were a bit surprised to see someone from England in the Curva Sud for a derby. So we got chatting from there. My Italian definitely wasn't very good then. I struggle speaking it now, to be honest. It's more so the understanding of it, because in Milan they speak quite a lot of dialect and they speak incredibly fast. So I'm a lot better with written than I am with spoken. But sometimes you get a few, and it's always positive. I've never had any problems about the fact that we're from England. Obviously, the club has links with England, an English founder, and we've had several English players in the recent and more distant past. But it's always been positive reactions to the fact that we travel overseas to support the team. And also, you'd be surprised how many fellow English people you see out there, that are there to that have flown over for the game for whatever reason. There's quite a big Italian community here in London, for example, and if I get a flight over for a game from London, there'll often be people with Milan stuff on. So yeah, you'd be surprised. It's a big international community, really, to be honest, inside the stadium. You've got people from here, there, and everywhere. So while people think that it must be 70,000 people from in and around the city centre of Milan going to games, it's actually not. It's very, very diverse. And I think that's one of the strengths of the club, because I suppose it testifies to a certain global appeal. But yeah, it's always been very, very positive reactions. People like, can I buy you a pint and stuff
That's
like
so
that.
nice. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, to finish off, let's do a little bit on the football itself. How do you feel about Milan right now? So don't think too much. Just tell me, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Where are Milan at right now, and how do you feel about it?
We're in a very uncertain place at the moment. This is probably the perfect time to actually do this, because the last few days have been interesting, would be putting it nicely. We played Genoa on Sunday and drew 3-3. There was a fan protest during that because the Curva said that there hasn't been enough clarity and communication from the club on what the plans are for the future and what the ambitions are moving forward. Obviously, we won the league title in 2022. What's followed since then domestically hasn't kicked on from that. Unfortunately, we've lost momentum. It's now common knowledge that we're going to part ways with our head coach, Stefano Pioli, at the end of the season. The vast majority of fans, myself included, agree that it's the right time for the cycle to come to an end. Massively appreciative of what he's done in terms of restoring us from being a joke to sort of respectability. But we need a head coach who can build on that and can take us to the next step, because we can't be losing the league title to Inter, as good as a team as they are, by this amount of points. We need to be challenging for that title next season with the squad that we've got. And then, there's work to be done on the transfer window as well. It's a big summer. We need to sign a new striker to replace Giroud. We need a midfielder, a centre-back. And all these names depend on who the next head coach is. And I think a lot of the ambitions for next season and beyond depend on who we hire as the next head coach. So it's a climate of uncertainty at the moment. I think it's a good summer to have a website, and a brand to be able to kind of exploit that in certain ways. But from a pure fan point of view, I find myself aligning with the Curva Sud in the sense that, like, we've had this American ownership for some time now, and we're yet to really see the signs that they want to become the best in Italy, let alone a contender in Europe again.
Well, Ollie, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. Good luck for next season. Hopefully on to bigger and better things. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. It was such a pleasure speaking to Oliver. We can't wait to bring you more chats like this with fans from across the footballing landscape, from ex-pros to bloggers, YouTubers, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. If you really liked it, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your pods. That will really help us out a lot. Thanks again, and catch you next time on the Sporticos Football Stories podcast.